let's get to the indictment. Counterpoints didn't cover this yesterday, but still some pretty big news. Can't take our eye off the legal drama involving Donald Trump. People will remember there was a Supreme Court ruling which effectively vacated some of the Jack Smith indictment against Donald Trump as related to January 6th. So Jack Smith actually convened a new grand jury and has brought new charges against Trump, which he says are in line with that Supreme Court ruling. Let's put this up there on the screen. The new indictment was actually filed on Tuesday. It includes some of the same criminal charges, but actually narrows the allegations, quote, in an attempt to comply with the Supreme Court ruling that former presidents have broad immunity from prosecution. So in the new indictment, one of the reasons they had to do it was because the Supreme Court ruled that former presidents, quote, are absolutely immune from prosecution for official acts that fall within the exclusive sphere of constitutional authority. So all of the charges have to come from a place where it is not a, quote, official act of the presidency. The new indictment does away, quote, with any reference to Donald Trump's interactions with the Justice Department, whom prosecutors alleged that he was trying to enlist in his effort to undo the election. By doing that, they take it outside the realm of the so-called official act and try to kick it into the realm of the political, when there we're talking both about language, about coercion, and about some of the false elector stuff that was happening under the purview of the campaign. So, for example, the first page of the old indictment refers to Trump as the 45th U.S. president. The new indictment only refers to Trump as, quote, a candidate for president of the United States in 2020. It also, quote, deletes all references to any Trump statement made from the White House. So, for example, that January 6th message that was made on Twitter, and instead focuses in on the campaign speech at a privately funded, privately organized political rally that occurred on that day. What actually stayed the same is 4 counts. It's obstruction of official proceeding, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and conspiracy against the right to vote. So all of those charges, they say, are within the realm of the Supreme Court ruling. Obviously, Trump is going to challenge them, and we're probably going to have to get a new ruling or scrutiny or whatever on this. But at the very least, here's what people can say. It's not, none of this is happening before the election.
No,
100%.
This is not going to be a short process. I'm sure it will go back up the chain in terms of appeals and challenges, likely end up back at the Supreme Court with them having to weigh in more specifically. One thing that you might recall from the decision that they issued with regard to presidential immunity is that even the conservatives, some of them issued like dissenting concurrences where, you know, they had a different opinion about how immunity would be defined, like which things are actually official responsibilities and which are in your personal capacity. So it's not at all clear exactly how they would create that dividing line. And I mean, it's a difficult line to draw. So I think it's entirely likely this ends up back at the Supreme Court. But it's the same 4 charges, you know, and that hasn't changed. Some of the details, underlying details have changed. Some of the phrasing, emphasizing he's a candidate, you know, this was in his role as a candidate, has nothing to do with his official responsibilities. Some of that has changed as well. But, you know, this was a separate grand jury, a different grand jury than issued the initial indictment that returned this now superseding indictment. And there was an interesting segment on CNN that we wanted to highlight for you all. So Ty Cobb, who's like a big shot Washington lawyer.
He was Trump's lawyer.
Very well known here, and was, for a time, Trump's lawyer when he was in the White House. He was interviewed on CNN, and he was like, these charges are very strong, and he's likely to face 6 to 9 years in prison as a result just of this particular case. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Does this indictment make a clean-cut case that the acts were personal?
I think it does. I think, you know, some of the editing that you highlighted in your intro is spot on, emphasizing the private nature of many of these acts, the private funding of the speech at the before the Capitol intrusion, Pence's ceremonial role, the non-governmental roles of the co-conspirators, which they can now say categorically, and now that Jeffrey Clark is out, because he was the only government official who was actually in the original indictment. He's no longer in this indictment. You know, whatever the indictment was going to look like after it went through whatever hearings the Judge Chuckin is going to have, and she still will have a hearing on the adequacy of this indictment. You know, it does have, you know, there is a interlocutory appeal available, at least as I read the Supreme Court decision. And that doesn't mean the Supreme Court has to take it if the DC Circuit acts before and they're content with whatever they do. But this is definitely, this hasn't been on course to go before the election for months.
Right.
This was never going, that was never going to happen. But as you point out, I mean, this is a very forceful document. It's pared down. Every sentence is, crisply worded. It's a tight narrative. You can't read this and not understand the crimes that Trump actually committed. And as you pointed out, 55 years is exposure. That he's not going to get 55 years, but he'll get 6 to 9 on this.
So, I mean, it's pretty confident there. I don't know, I don't know. But
yeah.
6 to 9 is a line. He's like, he's not going to get 55, but he's going to get 6 to 9 years.
He helped negotiate on the, again, I mean, I just see that so massively unlikely, but listen, he's the former Trump attorney, so we should at least take it somewhat seriously.
The other thing he said that was interesting to me is he was like, Trump's not going to take this seriously until it's like the sentencing happens and it's inescapable and he's headed to like he is not going to take this seriously until it's undeniable, which I thought was just having the fact that he worked closely with Trump, I thought was an interesting intellectual insight to the way that Trump approaches all of this.
Certainly true.
Yeah. The last thing that I'll mention here, it's a little crazy. I mean, the way we thought this election would go and the way it has actually gone have been two very different things. We really thought, and for good reason, that these trials and his, indictments and potential convictions and whatever would be so central to the election season. And it really is such a side note. Now, the one thing I will say, that is counter to that is he does have a sentencing date coming up in that Alvin Bragg case on September 18th, which will reinsert this back into the political conversation. So we'll see what happens there and how significant it is. I think it's very unlikely he ends up with this. It's a relatively minor charge that he was found guilty of. I think it's very unlikely that he would end up facing any prison time over it. But I guess you never know. It is theoretically possible, so we'll see how all of that goes down. But that's September 18th that we'll have that sentencing date. There was some push to, extend that or push it off for a while, but they are going forward with it. So that's the next significant Trump legal piece of
Georgia
news.
is past the election. Now this is past the election. I mean, the main two ones where he was the most in legal jeopardy are now at the very least past. Also, if he does get elected president, there will be so much, considering the Supreme Court ruling and that, all of the circus around that, being sitting president and facing some of this, it will be, so many novel legal constitutional theories will be tested.
Well, this one in particular is a federal case.
Yeah.
So, he theoretically can just pardon himself on that one and not,
that's true.
Not face it. And then you also have the question of like a sitting president being prosecuted, and that's typically been seen as a no-no. So, I think him getting elected is probably a get-out-of-jail-free card for all of these things, which, of course, heightens the importance of the election, certainly to the person of Donald J. Trump, who I'm sure would prefer not to go to prison.
Big time. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.